Souls-like is a genre of games that I did not think I would try, let alone enjoy. Even the release of Elden Ring did not push me to play a game from the genre. To me, it was interesting but challenging. I will need to accept the fact that if I miss avoiding a devastating attack from a lowly mob, all of my progress and the precious gaming time I spent will vanish in thin air. As a person that needs to work and spend time with my family, that is painful. But here I am, sharing my thoughts in a Souls like game that captured me in many ways I never thought it would. So while I share my thoughts, do consider to stay a while and listen. Mortal Shell is a single-player Souls-like action RPG. It was developed by a small team called Code Symmetry and published by PlayStack in 2020. The game received positive reviews and feedback, such as excellent performance on PCs, running smoothly at 60 frames per second, atmospheric world design, and arguably the game's visual design are excellent compared to other games during its time. The game also received a fair share of praise from critics and gamers alike. Some argued that the game difficulty was too easy and that the game length was too short, that it is limited in scope and enemy variety. Of course, issues were addressed as patch notes were released and Virtuous Cycle DLC, in my opinion, did address the variety issue of the game. Mortal Shell was the hook that got me into the Souls-like genre. To me, it has the right balance of difficulty and player consideration, which I will explain why in the gameplay section of the video. It's challenging but fun, brutal but forgiving. There will be minor spoilers, so those who haven't played the game yet, feel free to play and experience the game first and return to this video. Dark, grim, and depressing. These are the feelings that the game instantly conveyed to me in the first couple of hours of playing. I can smell and feel the damp and noxious air, the smell of molds in the ground and trees and oozing green water of whatnot in the twisting forest of the first area of the game, Falgrim. I haven't felt depressed when playing a game in a long while. This to me feels like the developers of the game really took their time to craft this experience for the player. Granted that the game was made in UE4, it doesn't mean that the developers didn't put much effort into creating an atmosphere that communicates what living in Falgrim feels like. To me, this was special. Something that I seldom see and feel in new games released in the last couple of years, especially from AAA games in recent memory. The level of detail in the environment and the sound design truly made me feel like I was immersed in the world of Falgrim. The feeling of uneasiness, grimness, and corruption remained when I met enemies and NPCs in the game. They seem human, but corrupted, and turned to the creatures that we see them.
Yes, slowly now.
Even your own body in the game is unnerving. Foundling. That's what our character is called. A translucent humanoid, no armor, no skin, just bare muscles and bones, but a creature that was able to live in such an unforgivable place nonetheless. In the game's tutorial, the player will learn a skill called hardening. It allows the player to harden or turn their body into stone. In this state, the player can take melee attacks from enemies momentarily, taking little to no damage at all. Eventually, the player will learn how to parry attacks and possess shells that act as a temporary body. To me, hardening was a clever mechanic that replaced the good old blocking with a shield in a game. Timing it right allows an opening for an attack. A successful parry allows you to do a follow-up attack that allows you to siphon the health out of your enemy, healing you instead, or stick a ticking bomb on your enemy. Defeated enemies will drop tar, glimpse, and items. Dread and depression can also be felt in other areas of the game. You can feel it in the ash-filled air in the Shrine of Ash, the frozen walls and chambers in the Crypt of Martyrs, and in each obsidian wall, tablets, and unreal floating towers in the Seat of Infinity. Each area gives the impression of once great temples and shrines, now broken and corrupted. Mortal Shell gave a lasting impression that stuck with me all throughout the game. This, along with the game's difficulty, did put me on the edge more than I can count. Stupidly thinking that this is just a slow-paced hack and slash game, I ventured out into the unknown recklessly. What could go wrong, I thought. I have years of experience playing action RPGs under my belt, but alas, I was in for a long and bumpy ride. Yes, to me, the game at first is grueling and difficult, especially if you haven't mastered the hardening and parry mechanic, like what I did. This was my first foray into a Souls-like game that I stuck with, and I understood and experienced for myself that death in this type of game is indeed inevitable. I know that, but I never felt so humbled by a game. When I thought I got the hang of the patterns of enemy strikes and attacks, suddenly a new enemy type would put me in my place. If you are not careful with your step and look at every turn, you will be ambushed, trapped, or fall. Even a miscalculated dodge, parry, or harden to any enemy's spells death. It did put me in my place. I had to be patient and treat the game with the respect it deserves. I had to understand that this is not an RPG game that I can just eat 20 plus deer stews and I will be okay. And that smashing the dodge and attack button is enough. No, it's not. And I had to learn it the hard way. And learn I did. After numerous deaths, accumulated frustrations, and a profound sense of dread and depression, I was able to beat the game. Understanding the mechanics and finding the right shell were crucial for me. I also learned that using items in this game is really a must. You don't get to save it for the next boss battle. Use it now to stay alive, and gather the items later again. Besides, the more you use an item in the game, the more familiar you will get with the consumed item, unlocking the added benefit it contains. Which does make sense even in real life. One might think that if this is how consuming an item in this game works, then you should just eat 10 healing mushrooms consecutively so that you can discover the extra benefits of the item. That is a yes and a no. It depends on the item. Items in the game, like healing mushrooms, don't spawn right away, and some items really drop. So, using items wisely is still the better decision. As introduced in the early parts of the game, the player can acquire different shells and weapons. In the base game, you can get 4 shells, 4 melee weapons, and 1 ranged weapon. The Vicious Cycle DLC adds 1 shell and 1 weapon. Shells can be found throughout the different areas of the game. The shells act as a temporary body that, once possessed, allows the player access to unique abilities, skills, and glimpses of memories of the possessed shell. These glimpses allows the player to understand not only the possessed shell but also give context and insight into the world they were in when they were still living. And the player can unlock this using in-game currencies called tar and glimpse. In my opinion, this is an immersive way to tell or introduce a character in the game, as well as the lore and history of the world the game is built on. And each shell story doesn't disappoint. Each will grab your imagination, and you may wonder what exactly happened to the shell, what it experienced, and what it saw. Coupled with good voice performance, we get an impactful, unique storytelling mechanism.
Existence is a curious matter. The greatest triumph in the universe, gifted and squandered. I shan't make the same mistakes as my brother. When the moment comes, I'll exercise restraint.
The weapons, although quite few, still delivers, and getting each weapon is not an easy task as well. You must prove yourself that you are worthy to wield the weapon, and this is not your typical kill this and number of enemies. No, it's more personal. The student versus the master. Prove yourself through one-on-one combat, win or die trying. Each weapon that the player can acquire from this character are as follows. A sword called Hallowed Sword, which is the first weapon the player will get. It's quick to use, medium in reach, have decent damage, and consumes enough stamina for each light and heavy attack. If damage and good range are what you prefer, then the Martyr's Blade is what you need to get. Martyr's Blade is a great sword that packs a punch. It's slow in the wind-up, have a long wide reach, has great damage, but consumes a great deal of stamina, especially when using heavier attacks. Another weapon that has a long reach is the Smoldering Mace. It has pretty good knockback and damage to shielded enemies compared to other weapons. It's decent in terms of overall speed, but using the heavy attack as the first move in your combo is quite slow. Has the longest reach of all melee weapons, if not similar to Martyr's Blade, packs good damage and have balanced consumption in stamina for its late and heavy attacks. The quickest weapon, excluding the new weapon added in the DLC, is the hammer and chisel, my personal favorite. This is the weapon of choice for players who prefer fast combo execution. It's the quickest but has the shortest reach and lowest damage per hit. But it balances out by having the lowest stamina consumption for its light and heavy attacks. And finally, the axe katana for the melee weapons, which the player can only acquire if the Vicious Cycle DLC is installed. Unlike other weapons, the axe katana allows the player to choose between a katana or axe willingly, hence the name. Each weapon mode differs in strength, speed, and stamina consumption. The axe is heavy and slow, but has powerful blows. The katana, in my opinion, is the quickest melee weapon and also has good damage. And then we have Ballista Zuka, the only ranged weapon in the game. As the name implies, it looks like a small ballista, but packs a punch like a bazooka. Unlike the other weapons, the Ballista Zuka cannot be found in any area. Ballista Zuka's damage is great, but very slow in the reload. So, caution and good distance from an enemy is advised when using this weapon. The bolts are quite rare to drop, but Vlas offers the bolts for purchase for some tar. The player can upgrade each weapon and unlock 2 abilities, except for the axe katana, which only had 1 weapon ability for each weapon mode. Since I am not an experienced Souls player, I found some of the boss battles difficult. Battling bosses in this type of game is different than other boss battles in the other game genres. Every death should have a purpose. Read attack patterns and discover all the boss's moveset. Each death is an aha moment for me. Just have to get good. And get good, I did. But once you get the feel and read of every attack pattern, that's where the fun ends, which leads me to the things that I did not particularly love about the game. The game, while I loved it, did have its flaw. NPCs are limited and some are forgettable. I'm really interested in each NPC's backstory, but either it's really not present in the game, or maybe it's too buried that I really wasn't able to notice. Enemy attack patterns are too limited, especially the bosses. Even in their second phase, if you are patient enough, you can see all of their moves in one go. So even if you died in that encounter with the boss, the player's chance of defeating the boss next spawn is higher. A more varied moveset will be a great addition if there is a sequel. But then again, maybe it's a design decision. And the etchings. Oh my. The etchings are too difficult to spot. No clues, even just a little. I just accidentally found one because I'm fighting a mob and accidentally hit a wall. But otherwise, I wouldn't know that this exists. I understand that maybe it was designed that way, but I think it's too much of a hassle to spot, let alone find every etching. If the player wants to discover all etchings and notes without checking a guide, then they must swing around hit walls and hope for the best. It's disappointing because each etching tells a story and lore about the game.
I see nothing now. Nothing at all.
It's been a while since I felt so fulfilled and gratified when beating a game. Thanks to Mortal Shell, it's rekindled a part of my gamer self that can only be felt when beating difficult games. The thrill of defeating a boss in a hard fought battle. Through all those deaths, respawns, and grinds lies a sweet and satisfying win. It felt like I accomplished something, not just another box ticked in my backlog of games that I will eventually forget about. The game taught me to be patient and that failure is part of the process, even in games. Deep inside, I already know that, but it's refreshing to see and realize that when playing a game such as this, I was deeply immersed in this game's dark and melancholic world. Its mysteries, characters, and stories. I often found myself thinking of what this world would look like before this happened. When I stumbled upon etchings or unlocked another story of the shell I possess. It's interesting and intriguing. I wish that it could be further explored in this sequel if there is one. What I appreciate even more in this game is the fact that there is an autosave feature when you accidentally quit the game or exit out of the game. Items, lore, and glimpses will not go to waste. Although one can argue that you can just travel back to save point to save your progress. I'm saying that in situations where you can't do that, you still have the option to save your progress. And I think it's a welcome consideration by the developers to add such a feature. As a father with a day job and having small time in a day to play and relax, this is something I really appreciate. I hope this game gets a sequel in the future. The hardening and shell mechanic is a solid foundation that the developers can further explore to polish and enhance. I can imagine new shells with different stories and abilities. It will definitely open different playstyles and approaches to the game. I recommend this game to those who are looking for another Souls-like game to play, but bear in mind that this might be a bit on the easy side for a seasoned Souls veteran. And to those like me who are just starting to dip their toes in the genre, this is definitely a good game to try. And with that, thank you for listening to and watching this first ever YouTube video of mine. There will be more game related videos coming, so thank you for sharing your precious time with me. Until then.